Martin, it is good to see you again. You are another one of the people that I was fortunate enough, or I've been fortunate enough to meet through Pavilion. When did you join Pavilion?
It's been a while. I actually joined when it was still called Revenue Collective. I think it's 4 years. Time is running.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It was about the time when you still needed to be invited. So yeah, but the same as you, didn't really enjoyed it. And I think it was probably one of the better decisions I took.
I joined around the same time. It was Revenue Collective at that point before it had shifted to Pavilion. And it's pretty cool, the number of people that you meet with kind of diverse backgrounds. How are there other communities that you're a part of beyond the Revenue Collective or Pavilion?
I think not at that scale. I've been engaged in some local communities here. In my field of area of expertise, we are running partnership meetups because there haven't been a lot for partnership folks, especially not in Europe. I mean, there's other groups like partnership leaders, but they are more targeting the leaders. And we thought, let's bring the operational people together. And we started that about 15 months ago as an idea. And just the other week, just last Thursday, we had another one. By now, they are sold out within days after we announced them. Tickets gone, seats are taken. And we have a really cool group of new faces and all faces. That's always very, very nice.
What have you learned in that process of kind of building that community, that network?
Sorry, say again?
What have you learned in the process of building the community, that network?
Well, there's one thing which is really crucial: start, right? You can make a lot of plans, and sometimes it's just, like you say, jump into the cold water and see if you can swim. We learned that if my take is, if you need to decide what you want to build. This community, and here as a partnership committee, is really at the heart of the idea. Like, we do it from the community for the community. So we are fortunate enough that people from the community help us to host the events. So we, at the end of the last meetup, I had like 3 people coming to me saying, "Hey, Martin, if you need a place for the next one, I'm happy to host." And that's what we say. We need a room for 30 people. Typically, these are, startup internet companies. They have fridges full of cold drinks. So that's usually safe. And if you're lucky, we get some pizza. But it's more about bringing the people together. And we also try to keep it lightweight. So we do have like a 15-minute knowledge sharing, but it's not a sales presentation. Somebody is speaking about their own experiences, their wins and their failures. And then we have an open Q&A, and then we just open the floor and people talk to each other. And this is what ultimately, should happen, that people connect to each other. And we had a person joining, just moved from Brazil to Berlin looking for a job. And someone says, "Oh, you speak Portuguese and you know technology and you are partnerships. Well, here's my address. Please apply." Right. And if this happens, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really powerful when you can bring together a group of people who have with some similar interests, like partnerships as an example. And then you start to realize they actually have other related interests with each other, and that connection builds a bit further. And through that connection, we can get to the point where we find potential solutions to challenges that we have. Maybe in that instance, the person who is looking for someone is in the process of opening up a base of operations in Portugal or in Brazil, wherever. But it's when you put yourself out there and when you create those places for that to happen, good things can happen. How did you go through? What was the process that you went through when you were looking to see who else is interested in partnerships? And we'll get into the depths and the details of partnerships, which is your background here. But when you went through that process and you said, "Look, there really aren't a lot of folks who are coming together in groups and community in Europe focused on partnerships." What did that search process look like? What made you think that there aren't as many out there? What did that process look like?
That's a very good question. I think when we started with partner experience, we thought like, okay, what should we do exactly? And who else is out there? Who's in our universe? Who's our ecosystem, right? And living in Berlin, in Germany, which has a very vibrant startup scene and ecosystem, you have literally tons and tons of meetups, and a lot of them are, and we felt like you find literally a meetup for literally everything. A lot of them are very low level, like for sometimes you feel like these are all the expats coming to Berlin and trying to find friends, and not really like a business meetup. And we found for revenue, for sales, for SDRs, for marketing, for dev, for rev ops, for devs, for product, for partnerships. And when you look at these places where you find all the other meetups, and you find like, okay, where's the one for partnerships? And this is one thing which is kind of a phenomenon, and maybe based on the segment I'm in. Partnership teams are way too often a team of one, right? So, which is actually, if you think about it, even more important that you have meetups, because if you don't have peers in your own company, you need to find peers outside your own company. Where could you find them? Well, on a meetup.
Right.
I think that was also, and then that's the other thing, right? When you start something and you do your market research, you don't find anything, you always wonder, is there nothing because nobody tried, or because several tried and failed and there was just not a demand? And this was the same for the meetups, as then a little bit later for the PXP Academy, where we tried, well, there's nothing. Okay, we give it a shot. And both worked out extremely well because people were looking for it. And some who were looking for it didn't find something. Some didn't even start looking because they thought there wouldn't be something like that. And now if we talk to people and we say, oh, there's this meetup. Oh, that's amazing. Can I join? When is the next one? And so there is the demand. And so to answer the question, we looked at the other meetups we saw, we didn't find anything which is about partners, and thought, okay, let's start it. Let's try it.
Very cool. And I like that you started all this part of the conversation really with just start. And when you just start, you can draw some really interesting people, or at least start to get some data to determine, are people interested in this thing. So let's talk about partnerships. How did you get into partnerships?
I guess like most of people, we stumble into it.
Yeah.
And there was once this, I don't know where it was, but it was like, yeah, and then you wake up one morning and you realize you're on partnerships. And this is kind of where many people fall into that, because there's kind of no formal education or something like that. Personally, for me, I think when I look back, can say I did partnerships for probably 20 years, but the one which kind of was pivotal in my career was about 15 years when I moved into startup company. My role back in the days was business development, which was, back in the days when it wasn't the tough job of people trying to do outbound to get in book a meeting for the AE, but really like develop new business, like whether it's a new market, geographically, customer segment, or basically just look what other assets your company has, which you could monetize outside the standardized product, which is sold by sales and promoted by marketing. And when I look back, this role was already 80, maybe 90% partnerships, which without me knowing or calling it necessarily, I do partnerships, right? I was business development at some stage, right? But the things I did was market entry into France as a German company with a partnership, then later to other markets with partners, then building an agency partner program globally, then OEM partnerships. So we partnered at that time with big companies like Ionis, which is big in Europe. It's the second largest hoster after GoDaddy, which we then signed up as a strategic partner later. So it was like I did it without actually having a playbook for it or a blueprint for it. It was really explorational. The CEO at the time when we had the conversation, he said like, you look like somebody who could help our company to grow. We need smart people like you. I don't have a position open. I have like this marketing role or this BD role. I said, marketing I know, but others know it better because I'm not a specialist. I'm more like, the journalist. He said, like, I think BD is what I should do. I don't have a job description. I said, I like that. And over the years, I was 6 years in this company. We had a tremendous growth at that time. And that was very much driven by partnership. My next role then was already, SVP partnerships at Uber, because there was a very clear go-to-market split to, okay, here's the market we address directly, and this is the market we go with partnerships. That was kind of my journey along the way. And I guess what made us successful then was really to I like this idea of partnerships. I always joke I could have earned more if I would just have stayed in sales, but it was too boring. And I like this, every partnership is unique. You need to really understand the partner business and think about how can you build something which lasts. And this kind of, so long answer, stumbled into it, loved it so much, couldn't get away from it.
What are some of the things that people get wrong when thinking about partnerships? Like, given your experience and what you've seen stumbling into it and kind of looking, at more of this business development opportunity that's out there at first, which is, hey, let's go in and open up a new market where we've been successful in another area. Let's see where else we might be able to grow. Let's just back to that piece around what is it that people typically get wrong when it comes to thinking about partnerships?
One thing which is pretty challenging for us, as a community, is that partnerships is little defined. We're using terms or terminology which is not necessarily defined. My favorite one is technology partnership. If you say technology partnership to four people, everybody nods and you have at least six different opinions on what it should be. This is one thing, sometimes it reminds me, I don't know if you remember the movie Philadelphia, when Denzel Washington always asked, like, explain me like I would be 3 years old.
Mm.
And I tend to say, okay, I believe I know what you mean, but just to make sure that we really talk about the same thing. The other even bigger challenge I see is that especially executives, founders, revenue leaders, they have not a very good understanding of partnerships, which is not a problem at all. It's just, it just happens. And then they have this idea, they hear something, hey, we should do partnerships, or this other buddy on the founder circle says he was so successful with his channel, or they read an article that HubSpot is driving 70% by partners and say, oh, let's do partnerships. And then let's partner with Salesforce, or let's partner with Microsoft. And, in partnerships, it's not about who I want to partner with. Yes, this is critical, but more important is why would they partner with me? And I always joke when I was 20 years old or 25 years old, I wanted to date Angela Jolie, but she didn't want to date me, right? So if I, as a company, wants to start a partnership, it's not thinking so much about what do I expect from my company. Yes, of course, I need to have a very clear understanding, and revenue is not a goal, it's a result. So I need to understand what I actually want to achieve and can achieve. But even more critical is like, what should I do? What can I do that the partner is interested in partnering with me? Because this is not a transactional relation. It's not like you give me money, I give you my product or service. This is like, hey, let's work together towards a mutual goal. And this is what I see. Or I could simplify it like putting yourself in the other's shoes and think about, not who is my IPP, my ideal partner profile, but more like what can I do that I become the ideal partner profile for the other company?
That perspective is
Yes.
super important, right? Like this whole idea of, yeah, well, and John F. Kennedy had it in one of his speeches that, ask not what your country can do for you, what can you do for your country? And you can do this in the context of both employees inside your organization, partners that you have inside your organization, partners outside of your organization, customers that you work with, really kind of taking that lens and shifting it around and say, not what can I get out of them, but how can I serve them? How can I put myself in a position where I can be an ideal partner for them? The highlight on definitions is really important, I think. And if you're out there and you're thinking about partnerships inside your organization and you have very different definitions around what partnerships are and why they're important to your business and what you want to accomplish, you're going to set yourself up for failure because there will be confusion in these partnership relationships. So how do you go through the process of getting better at defining what is a partnership?
Very good question. Before I answer that, I would like to come back to one point you said, because that's so good and to the point. We learned for many years that we need to be customer centric. So we
Yep,
think about customer experience, CX.
sure.
More recently, we started to think about, okay, what do we do for our employees? So, there's this employee experience,
Yep.
but there's way too little companies who think about their partner experience. That's why we picked up that name, what do I do to provide that great experience? coming back to a question about how, what does define a partnership? It's, of course, as a company, I should have a clear expectation of why would I start this partnership, right? What I believe it's in for me. And again, I said that earlier. This is another typical thing which always kind of makes me cringe is if I hear somebody say, "Yeah, we do partnerships, and the goal is revenue." And then it's like, no, the result is revenue, but the goal why you start is to do something which is maybe because you want to get high quality leads for very, reasonable lead costs. So you want to actually help your marketing to fill the pipeline, not only with smart marketing qualified leads, but with partner qualified leads, which turn to be always of higher quality. What does higher quality mean? They typically convert faster. They typically have a shorter sales cycle, higher closing probability, and very often they have a higher MRR or deal size. And we can dive into that, why is that so, et cetera, et cetera. But or I want to, maybe I can build a reselling business. Maybe I find companies who actually help me to sell into, customer groups, which I probably didn't find reach myself. Or, sometimes they can open verticals I'm not able to sell indirectly. Sometimes they're just supporting my own team. They kind of expand my sales capacity, right? But then I have to have a very clear understanding of why would someone else put my product to the market? Why would someone else, if my AE who's paid for selling my solution, but the partner that they are typically on their own business. They're not my contracted AEs. So how can I align my goal that they really put my solution to the market, that it's totally natural to their own company goal? Yeah, to be more specific. People always tend to look at Salesforce or HubSpot because they have this huge partner business. But let me tell you a secret: the majority of these partners, especially with Salesforce, are implementation partners. When Salesforce started these partnerships, these implementation comes post sales. So when Salesforce started these conversations many years ago, they went to a system integrator, said, "Hi Meg, I just closed that deal. This customer needs somebody who can implement my solution and customize it. Would you like to take this business I want to give you and make money on it?" And hardly anybody would say, "No, I don't want your business," right? So ultimately, that was the start for this partnership relation, was very often that Salesforce could bring system integrators, software IT company or implementation companies business. And if you look at the data, you can see that companies like Salesforce or Adobe, they have like 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 ratios. For one software dollar, these guys earn between 5, up to $7 in service money. So that's why they like it so much. That's why they love to collaborate with Salesforce. And of course, if then a company comes to this implementation partner and says, "Hey, I want to implement a CRM, which one would you recommend?" Of course, they recommend Salesforce. And of course, they turn into referral partners. But if you look at the timeline, that's actually the second step. And I think this is a nice idea, and I'm sorry for diving so deep into it, is really understanding why would a different company who has their own agenda, their own goals, pay into your goals. It's only the point if you really are aligned and have a mutual interest in that.
Yeah, reinforcing the importance of alignment and mutual interest is super important here. And it's one of those things where I would ask anybody who's thinking about partnerships to think about this. If we are struggling with alignment inside our own organization, how can we think that we might be able to create alignment outside of our organization? And I see you smiling. Have you experienced instances where people who are not aligned inside their organization try to build out partnership programs and ultimately, if have you experienced that before?
Yes. I mean, one is that sometimes it's feel like, yeah, we can't fix our own internal process, so let's partner. Maybe they miraculously solve that, but actually it makes it probably even more harder. I have another thing which is, very, very close to my heart. It's, if you talk about internal alignment or missing internal alignments, very often that teams are set up to compete with each other.
Sure.
So, it's marketing sales complains that sales does not convert the leads correctly. Sales complains that the leads generated by marketing are not ideal, to say it politely.
Yeah.
And then, people spend time on arguing who generated that lead, which actually performed. And if you bring an external partner in, you add to that discussion where then the people start, I would say they start fighting, distributing the cake instead of working together to bake three more, right?
Yeah.
And if if you are on target, if your business is growing and everything runs smoothly, that's nice and it's not surfacing. The problem is it starts the moment when the goals are hard to hit. And people in this moment where you would actually need everybody to pull together and work as a team, that's the moment when some people will start then to try to grab that lead or steal this deal or and ultimately it's a devil's circle. In the moment where you need them to work together, they start fighting against each other. And any minute you have an escalation, like I had this conversation on Thursday on this partner meetup. One said, I can't recall how many Slack escalations I was pulled in to decide whether this was a partner generated or partner sourced lead or whatever lead. And any minute you spend on mediating this or negotiating this or solving this is a minute you don't have to win the next partner, the next client, the next prospect. So this is really crazy. And if you, again, if your marketing, sales, and SDR teams and CS teams are not aligned and finger pointing why certain things don't happen, and then you have an external partner, as an external partner, I would just walk away and say, you sort out your stuff alone. You may come back when you have aligned yourself.
Conflict can occur both inside an organization and outside of an organization. And I've been around a number of organizations where channel conflict has been created intentionally. And it's unfortunate that when channel conflict is created intentionally, because it does not serve either organization well. And I had an instance way back when we were talking about some leads and contacts and who was going to take primary ownership of managing the sales cycle with the client. And the leader in that segment of the business came back and said, remember who pays your check, who pays your salary, who signs your check. And it was a shot really at, we need to put the organization first. We need to put the organization first. And on that side, it was not really about the organization first. It was about whether or not someone was going to get a full commission on a deal. And so it was more about them, not the organization. And it certainly wasn't about the client. It wasn't about how do we put ourselves in the best position to serve the client? How do we put ourselves in the best position to continue to engage in the partner who's investing time, energy, and resources across building out a certain ecosystem? How do we come together and say, look, we ran into a challenge. How do we avoid channel conflict in the future? Put systems and process in place. What is our comfort level with channel conflict? Because we know that as we're growing quickly, things are going to break. And then how do we resolve that conflict when things happen? And if you know those kind of three things, you'll be in a better position to not have to get into this constant back and forth negotiation. Yeah. And I think the takeaway here as we're talking through this is realize that conflict occurs inside your organizations, especially as teams are going to collaborate or conversions happen across teams. Martin shared marketing to sales as an example, or even sales to success as an example, like those conversions. How well are we aligned there? So let's talk about alignment. How do we get aligned? What are some ways? What are some best practices, things that we can do as leaders inside organizations to improve alignment?
That's something which I'm thinking a lot. And, I regularly get asked about, how should I build a comp plan for partnerships and the likes. And then the thing is, I personally believe in team goals, to incentivize the people to work like incentivize them on the behavior you want to see.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different story, and that's not my core, but I still wonder why sales reps are the only ones we believe we need to put the carrot in front of them to make them work. You don't put a commission on the developer's head for the number of code lines he writes, or the number of submits he does in the GitHub, or but we do believe, or seem to believe, that sales reps don't function unless we force them with money. And if you incentivize very strongly on an individual level, then you absolutely encourage egoistic behavior. If you don't want egoistic behavior, so what I see is that you have a comp plan, and then you have to build all these rules and regulations and exceptions and measurements and laws. And ultimately, you could save yourself if you would probably don't put so much pressure on the individual bonus or a commission plan. But that's not my area. I'm happy I'm not a CRO. I'm happy I'm not a CSO, because my partnership teams are always focused on team goals, or have always been focused on team goals. And I made more, variable pay for individual performance on quality, not on quantity, or, on things I want them to do.
Let's just because the topic has come up. So let's go into this and go back and forth with each other a little bit on this piece around compensation as an example, or alignment in objectives, or really the different incentives that you put in place to reinforce certain behaviors. As a former chief revenue officer, or someone who operates as a fractional chief revenue officer, these things are really important. You've got to understand, number one, what are the jobs to be done? What's the actual work that needs to happen? What are the outcomes? What are the objectives? What are we actually trying to accomplish? So what from a goal perspective, then how from a strategy perspective, and then a what from a tactical work standpoint. And then you can kind of go through that and say, all right, given what we know about what we're trying to accomplish, and then how we're organizing the team to go after and accomplish it, here are the specific things, behaviors that we want, jobs, tasks, however you want to organize it, to be done in order to get there. Now, sometimes the job to be done, the role, the type of person that you're trying to bring in for that job to be done, you want them to be super hungry to be able to go out and eat what they kill, to grow a business, to create this opportunity that's much bigger than themselves. So like, you don't want them just to come in at their on target earnings or come in at plan. So you want a certain persona that you want to bring in, and to bring in and attract that type of persona, you lay out, they are interested in a plan where they're taking 50%, they're leveraged 50%, or 50% of their compensation is based on a base payment and 50% is based on variable. That is very different than wanting to bring somebody in who you're actually looking to maybe cultivate a much longer term relationship, do a lot of other things inside the business, and then create other opportunities for growth. In that instance, you might have a 60-40 or 75-25 leveraged plan. When you start looking at this from a partner perspective, and you think about partners that you're paying 30 cents on the dollar, a 30% commission for winning business and securing and managing that business, or maybe 10% because they're a referral partner, or 50% because they're some other type of partner, or whatever your framework is. Remember what behavior you're looking to incentivize and how you're operating and plugging into their business. And I think they both apply. Martin, I know this is a little bit different direction than what we intended in the conversation, but how would you agree that that the thinking applies relative to how you determine people that you want to hire into certain roles inside your business to do certain work, and the types of partners you want to bring on to do certain things to help your business grow? And then you've got to factor in compensation levels, shared risk, shared value exchange in each of those discussions.
I mean, you totally open up a big pot of questions here. Let me try to answer first the easiest one. Rule number one in channel partnerships, whatever you pay them as commission is never enough. What does it mean? people will not starting selling more because you give them 5% more commission. Because remember, general businesses, they're not in the business of selling your software, they're in the business to sell their own business or
Yeah.
their own services, and your product needs to be tied in nicely. They will not say no to 5% more, but it will not bring you them more business, right? So that's number one. Number two, 30% commission on a reseller versus your own commission. Keep in mind, and we had this conversation previously, and I know that you are very much aware of it, but
Yeah.
some others are not. The 10% you probably pay your sales rep is just for closing the deal. The 30% you pay to resellers probably because they also brought the lead. They probably also went through the sales cycle. They qualified it. They actually do the billing. You don't have the admin part. You don't even have the cash flow risk because they pay you and they collect the money. So they have the collection risk. So just don't compare apple and pears on that one.
Right.
To the other question, I'm coming, as you know, and here I'm from my wonderful accent, I'm from Germany. We do not have anything close to 50-50 on sales.
Okay.
It's totally natural to have, I mean, maybe then in some exceptions, but normally you would rather look at 70-30 or something like
Uh,
that,
okay.
because we don't want people to need to close deals to pay their rents or their mortgages. What happens if you put them, and I don't really believe in this hungry, because this hungry means for me that they are somewhat desperate. They have not, if you look at the Maslow's pyramid of things we need to cover as human beings, food is the underlying thing. If you not have enough food, then you die. So they need to do whatever it takes to get this money to pay their bills or, buy food. If you have this in mind, how do you prevent that they oversell? How do you prevent that they do shit in, shit out? Apologies for my French here. That you mentioned earlier this alignment, they close this deal, they get their commission, they throw it at CS, and CS then has the first onboarding call with the customer, and customer says, oh, by the way, where's the unicorn you promised me your software would be? And CS says, oh, wait, let me check with the roadmap with the product people when it will be on the roadmap. Because the seller completely did too much to just get this deal closed. Or the other behavior I hate is that people will try to claim as much territory as they potentially can, because they are always afraid that whatever territory they need to give away would be the one where the big fish is, the gold. Boy said that the gold thingy in the mountain when you had gold rush, right? Everybody was trying to claim as much land,
Right.
even though not in 5 years they could have even managed to work on it. And this is really where I feel like, what's wrong with paying the people a solid salary and just do a normal personal development talk with them? You know whether they perform or not. You can see if they do the activities. You can check your sales for CRM. Did they do the calls? Did they follow up on the lead? Took it them 5 days to write a follow-up email? What will change if you pay them on this? And this is the moment where, as a partnership person, I feel like there's something, in my opinion, broken in the bigger system. And I know that neither you nor me will change it. But if we can get one revenue leader out there thinking twice about their commission and why they believe this would, and they are some who are more open to look at team targets. Because, if you sell to enterprises, we know this, right? If you have a big deal to close, you need your solution engineers, your sales engineers, you need your CS team. It's not, why does the AE get all the credit when the hard explanation comes from the sales engineer who sits down, writes the concept, convinces them, and just the AE, because he's the AE, gets a big check? I
So,
don't get that.
so I think this is a really good conversation to have among leaders inside an organization. And look at Martin and I as both leaders inside organizations who have dealt with many of these challenges and questions. And you go through the process of saying, okay, well, how do we compensate people fairly? One thing, depending on role, I never want I never want the person who's in that role to have to hit their on target earnings to live the lifestyle that they want to live. Like you should be able to pay rent and provide food and do all of those things with your base salary and set up your standard of living as an individual contributor to align with that so that the variable commission, the other part of that is additive. Now, I know that there are some people saying, "Hey, you know what? That sounds great. You've got 20 some odd years of experience in leading sales teams and operating as an individual contributor and doing all of those things." Look, I was there. I made less than $36,000 a year in my first couple of years out of school working at UPS. There are you start to adjust your living based on means, and not get yourself into a situation where you expect, because I hit my on target earnings or I blow through a number, that that's now my new standard. There are people who will manage to a number, and they'll manage to a number to keep it consistent at that OTE. But those aren't the kind of people that you want in those roles that have the high upside for growth. You The other thing that I think Martin really hit on is the importance of leadership inside your organization. Because as a leader, if I have people who are selling solutions into organizations that we're not able to renew, because when we hand them over to customer success, things weren't aligned, meaning we didn't have an account plan in place, we weren't clear about fit, we convinced them to buy something instead of aligned with solving for a specific problem that we know inside their organization, that's a leadership problem that falls back on me. That's not the rep. If I allow the rep to continue to behave like that, again, all on me, because
Agreed.
I'm supporting and driving that. And I'm talking to you, the leader that's out there, who will, in the course of the next 2 months, get toward the end of the quarter and you push your reps to get deals over the line because you want to hit your quarterly number. And then you get irritated when those deals come in and they don't have pipeline for the remaining part of the year, or they go into customer success and they don't renew and they don't grow. So this is a leadership challenge that we run into in organizations, and it translates over to the same problem that we have on the partnership side when we start to put specific criteria in place in order for partners to maintain an exclusivity or do something.
Tiering, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Martin, you got me fired up on a Monday morning. Thank you.
That's
Monday
great. I
afternoon for
mean,
you.
this one thing which I think, I the one thing I never wrap my head around in sales is why would you accept a deal just because it's 28th of December? Why would you accept a deal which you wouldn't look at on 2nd of January?
Right.
And this is but the leadership, you mentioned it's a leadership thing, but keeping in mind that the average tenure of a CRO in a startup is, what is it, 17, 18 months?
Yeah. It keeps
It's
shrinking.
actually,
I think it's
it
down to
needs to
14.
scale up. It needs to scale up to the founder or the board.
Yeah.
Because if I incentivize my revenue leader, my CRO, my CEO on hitting this sometimes insane numbers
Yep.
to keep their job, of course they will pull the pressure down. And this is something which a couple of things which I hope they can translate to English a bit. It's a difference, I personally think, between being entrepreneurial, which is thinking the long term, and being a manager. There was this movie back in the 80s with Danny DeVito, OPM, Other People's Money, right? Is it your money or is it other people's money, which you just try to get as much as possible from them? And this drips down to something else we can say in German. It's do I literally convince the client, the prospect, about buying my software? Did I convince them in a meaning that they understand the value, or did I talk them into it? Did I kind of just talk them through their obstacles or objections and just got them to sign, take my bill, or take my commission check and look for the next job, right? And this is something which I earlier today had a call with someone from a Pavilion, talk about Pavilion, who is also doing, sales consulting for several years now. And we kind of shared, and he said like he started his tenure in sales many, many years ago when it was in a company who was selling for Google Ads when they were still, more new. And he always looked into this consultative selling, even without completely knowing that it's consultative selling. So he never talked companies into it because he made sure that his customers were happy with him. And he built his reputation about this. And some of his colleagues were trying to hit their quotas or trying to hit their OTEs or their kickers or their all these fancy names you have when you get over your target. And they burned brands for years, which will never, ever, or never touched Google Ads ever or any Google product ever again. right? And this is
Yeah.
what I think is the question between, if you look at the good old school businesses which were built up by our fathers or grandfathers or grandmothers, they were always looking like, how do I build this company that my grandchildren will have a great company to continue to work on. And with this venture capital, sometimes it's like, hey, let's hit the next quarter, and I don't even think about next year, right?
It the incentives are misaligned, right?
Yes.
The
If
incentives
you
are
have a channel
misaligned.
conflict, if you have it, that's something, I always say, I was on Pavilion on the CRO summit and I spoke in a room or I was on a panel in front of 150 CROs. And there was a question about channel conflict. And I got very agitated about it because I'm very passionate about it. I said, there's no channel conflict. It's not a direct sales team. It's not a partnership deal. It's a company deal. If you have a channel conflict, your incentive systems are broken. You would not allow AE number one steal a deal from AE number two. Why the heck would you allow AE number one from stealing from a partner, which are trying to put your product to the market? And guess what? If you do this, you said like, if somebody does it, fire this person. And they looked at me blank and said, okay, maybe give him, it was Europe, you need to give him a warning. But, if he does it twice, then you fire him or her because they must not do this. This is not acceptable behavior, neither in your own team nor in your extended partnership team. Guess what? The other partner probably has 10 more deals, which he will not bring to you anymore because he had a very bad experience. Somebody poached your client. I have a good friend, CRO, George Leith from Canada. He said, don't poach my clients. And the one escalation we once had, when he called me in the middle of the night because time zone difference, he said, Martin, you're poaching my clients. I said, no, we don't. I don't know what the situation is, but I can promise you we never poach your clients. And then we dive deeper into it. It was a misunderstanding. It turned out to be a misalignment. We, of course, never poached the client. His client reached out to us. We referred him back to our partner. And that's speaking about processes, said it earlier. If you grow fast, shit will hit the fan. There will be things going wrong. So you have to have a plan A and you have to have a plan B. So you should have a process that your CRM is capturing potential partner leads, but you also sometimes partners don't share it. So the plan B would be that your pricing is on par with your partner's pricing. You do not undercut your partners. So even if, and a good, but procurement should always reach out to the vendor directly to get a second quote. So if you are reached out, approached by an inbound, nice name, your price, which you give out because you just don't know that's a partner lead, should not be undercutting your partner. Nothing happened. It happened to me. I have been there. Great name, inbound. SDR gets excited, checks Salesforce, wasn't in Salesforce, gives it to AE. AE reaches out, sends out a quote. Quote was exactly on par with the partner. Nothing
Right.
happened.
Yes. There's
Alignment, right? Alignment.
so and I hope as we are going through this conversation that you realize that although we're talking about partners, this is not about external partners. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit about internal partners and external partners. This is an organization leadership challenge. Hire the right people, reinforce the right behaviors, evaluate your data, and continue to adjust. And over time, when you see bad behavior, you see misaligned behavior, put the systems and processes in place to correct those because you will, when you bring on partners, create channel conflict. That channel conflict might be across the partner ecosystem, partner to partner channel conflict. It may actually be indirect versus direct channel conflict, partners versus direct sales groups. It may be inside your organization. If you take the time, though, to identify the conflict, work through the conflict, solve for the problem associated with that conflict, and communicate clearly, good things will happen. You will learn and your business will grow. And that is leadership. That is culture. Like those are two very important aspects to this that have a significant impact on your ability to serve customers, your ability to work with partners, your ability to be a good partner, which ultimately drive revenue and execution. And that's how they all kind of align with each other as we've been going through the conversation. I love the discussion around the experiences that you've had where if something comes in, it's not in Salesforce, it's you end up communicating to that person that here's what the deal is, and then they see the consistency in the market around the pricing. You've now built a level of trust not only with the partner but also with the
with
customer,
prospect.
and you have some consistency across, and that's what we're looking for. Like, we want this consistency and this trust. If that person went into Salesforce, saw that there was a partner, and knowing that there was a partner in there, knowing what the partner pricing was, and decided to undercut it by 10% to try to get the deal, now what have you done? So what happens in that situation? How would that conversation have gone, Martin, if that was the experience where the partner didn't register the deal properly, or the information didn't go or actually, excuse me, the partner did register the deal. The information is in the CRM, comes in as an inbound lead. Somebody else takes that inbound lead and then decides to
Tries to undercut.
compete against that partner and provide an
Yeah.
additional 10% discount. How do those conversations go with both the partner and with the client?
Very clear answer here. If you said about, we talk about alignment.
Yeah.
Alignment starts with being very vocal and transparent about your expectations.
Yeah.
Way too often, we assume that the other person knows what I'm expecting without actually talking about it.
Right.
So, given that this AE knows that we are a partner first company and he knows, or she, that she shouldn't undercut the partner, and there's a real clear process. If you see it's a partner deal, first thing you do, you reach out to the partner manager and the partner, letting them know that they come back to we had an inbound, and then you go back with the aligned pricing. If this was clear, which I would assume it was,
Yeah.
it should have been, and this person did behave, then it clearly behaved against a clear rule of engagement. In US, I would fire this person.
Okay.
In Germany, takes a bit longer,
Hmm.
but that would be the first of the red flags. I need to fire this person.
Yeah.
And the conversation with the partner would be, I would literally go on my knees and beg for pardon that it happened, explaining what steps we took internally that it will never happen again. And yeah, period. That's what I did when something like that happened. I had seen it in another situation where I had people who were really hungry or made hungry, didn't have enough to eat, and felt like they need to get this damn deal in so to close the quarter. And I mean, as you said, right, this was not ideal alignment, even though there was a clear rule that was just too tempting to get any deal in. And we had to make this. So you must not allow it. It's toxic. You cannot allow yourself to allow such a behavior in your organization. As simple as that, as hard as it might be for the individual, it must just not happen.
And people will get emotional about it. I mean, and they'll get emotional for a number of reasons. It could be the money that's at stake. It could be the performance. It could be something that's going on inside your household that you know absolutely nothing about, where they just got into an argument with somebody and it just happened that they made a poor decision. Like, there's so many different things that can influence behavior, because we're dealing with human beings. We have human beings on both sides. We have humans on the customer side, on the partner side, on the internal side. We've got all of this pressure. You've got investor pressure, depending on how you're funding your organization. So be okay with the fact that people are going to make mistakes. The challenge is if they make mistakes with malicious intent, if they make mistakes because they're deliberately trying to do something differently that doesn't align with core values, then you can get into some of those discussions around, hey, how do we remediate that? Do we do it through some kind of termination? Do we do it through some kind of performance improvement plan? Do we do it through some other kind of documentation process? But if the expectations aren't clear around what is expected from a behavior perspective, what's expected related to a core principle perspective, then how can you expect your people to behave properly if you've not set up those proper expectations? And how can you expect your partners to behave properly? I think the thing, again, just to reinforce this is not only a partner go to
Not at
market
all.
discussion. This is a leadership thing that we all run into, and we run into it with partners inside our organization and outside of our organization. And I really appreciate the discussion, Martin, both around alignment, around communication, around expectation, and that piece around thinking a bit differently about how we compensate people, because there are a number of different ways to incentivize people to do certain things, and there are different compensation models that work. There's a company that I'm familiar with out here in the States who's removed variable compensation. So they do a simple salary with some kind of bonus structure in there for people who are part of their revenue teams. That can work. Just know what part of the game you're playing and what behaviors you're trying to drive and how you're working through it. Martin, awesome conversation. I think we should probably do this again, and because you start to realize, at least what I realize in these kind of conversations, is how similar the challenges we run into are from a global perspective. Like, this is not a operating channel partnerships in US or North America versus operating channel partnerships in Berlin or across the broader DACH region or across Europe. It's we are ultimately run into a similar set of challenges anytime you're talking about things like making money, revenue, we're dealing with people, human beings who are interacting with humans, and then working through processes and systems like the organization things that play through. So thank you very much for the conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on? Where can they connect with you directly?
I think the easiest way would be our LinkedIn profile. So look for Partner Experience or our website, partnerexperience.com, with a big X. That would be the easiest one to connect with us and find out what we're doing and how we help companies to achieve capital efficient growth by using partnerships to elevate their existing go-to-market.
Perfect. We'll include links in the show notes. If you know of somebody who would find this conversation valuable, please share it with them and let Martin and I know via LinkedIn. We're both active on LinkedIn. It's good to see those shares. The shares help grow the audience and help expose the content to a number of folks who are struggling with the kind of challenges that we'll talk about we've talked about in this conversation and talk about in other conversations on the podcast. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?